Story Shattered Reflections. Chapter 1. Shadows of Duskmire. In Duskmire, the city where shadows clung like parasitic specters, the night was a sentient thing, whispering secrets to those who dared to listen. The cobblestones gleamed wetly under the pale light of the street lamps, casting an eerie glow that seemed to leech the life from the city. It was here that Detective Catherine Graves prowled, driven by an insatiable need to untangle the mysteries that wove through her city like a poisonous vine. Duskmire had always been a place of paradox, a city of beauty and ugliness, grandeur and decay. It thrived on its artistic fervor, its reputation upheld by an underground society where the avant-garde mingled with the absurd. Art was the city's lifeblood, but lately that lifeblood had turned rancid with the stench of death. A series of grisly murders had rocked the art community, each victim an affluent member tainted by their dealings with an elusive figure known only as the Night Painter. Under her trench coat, Catherine clutched the case file that was already beginning to weigh her down with its burden of unsolved mysteries. Each victim, different yet disturbingly similar, had been found with a singular object, a painting supposed to be the work of the Night Painter. Yet none had seen the artist. None could identify a brushstroke or a whiff of paint from the anonymous specter who hovered at the edge of Duskmire's consciousness. The scent of rain mingled with the inexplicable feeling of eyes watching from the shadows. As Catherine ventured further into the web of Duskmire's night, the streets grew darker, the corners sharper. Her instincts, owned razor-sharp by years on the force, had never failed her. Yet here in this living dreamscape, she felt ill at ease. Catherine's past had caught her in its hooks years ago, and though she kept walking away from it, the specter of her guilt never ceased following. She had seen such fragile happiness, only to watch it shatter like glass. The specters of her failures loitered behind her, urging her silently toward redemption. Tonight, her destination was the Gilded Brush, a speakeasy at the heart of Duskmire's clandestine art scene. Its patrons were savants and psychotics, eccentrics and enigmas, each drawn to the magnetic darkness offered by the Night Painter's enigma. It was rumored that someone here knew the secret to finding him. And so Catherine ventured forth, chasing shadows and chasing ghosts, determined to uncover truths that might very well break her. Chapter 2. The Gilded Brush. The Gilded Brush sat on the outskirts of Duskmire's more respectable district, nestled between a derelict theater and a crumbling townhouse long abandoned by its aristocratic owners. To the untrained ear, it might have been just another relic of the past. To those who knew its secret, it was a sanctuary. Story. As Catherine approached, a mellow jazz riff leaked from the entrance, a siren song drawing in souls eager for the chaotic embrace of inspiration. Underneath the jazz, hushed conversations wove a tapestry of intrigue, punctuated by the clink of glasses and an occasional burst of laughter. The interior was a study in anachronism, alive with walls plastered chaotically with remnants of posters, abstracted paintings, and enigmatic photographs. Each piece seemed to scream for attention while simultaneously whispering secrets from a forgotten world. Dense smoke curled in the air, adding to the haze as the glinting lights cut through like knives. Catherine navigated the crowd with a practiced ease, her eyes scanning the faces of artists and revelers bent over the bar or sequestered in booths. The room held a spectrum of humanity, curators with shifty eyes, muses entangling themselves within eccentric circles, and collectors with ambition etched deeply into the lines on their faces. All were searching for something: inspiration, escape, perhaps even absolution. At the bar she spotted her contact, a painter of small renown and dubious motives. Lydia, perpetually garbed in black and graced with unnerving air, beckoned Catherine over with a theatrical wave and an enigmatic smile. Her hair, a raven-black cascade, framed a face wise in the ways of the world and the darker paths through it. "You're late, Graves," Lydia purred, her voice a velvet drawl that seemed to belong to another era. Catherine took a seat, shrugging off her coat. Late implies intent. The city doesn't operate on a schedule except its own. Lydia chuckled, her eyes glittering with mischievous interest. "Looking for the Night Painter, I imagine. Their Chapter 2, The Gilded Brush," continued. Lydia's voice dropped to a whisper, the soft undertone threading its way through the cacophonous chatter, like a dark secret passed between conspirators. He's a ghost, you know, or perhaps a mirror of the city's soul, the best and worst of what it offers. Catherine leaned in, her curiosity skillfully concealed. Some ghosts tend to leave more than just cold spots, Lydia. Lydia's laugh rippled through the air, a lilting sound with an edge that could cut glass. You always did have a knack for the poetic when it suits you, Graves. But take heed. What if finding him is like finding one's own reflection in a funhouse mirror? Distorted, fractured, perhaps that is why his works are said to curse those who gaze upon them. Catherine knew Lydia's games, yet there was a sincerity in the woman's words that made her pause. The victims and their art collection, you knew them? Lydia nodded, a shadow crossing her face. They were obsessed, possessed perhaps. Each sought the forbidden allure of the night painter, yet none lived to unravel his truths, and now they are all shattered. Story for a moment, Catherine felt a chill that had nothing to do with the dampness of the night or the haze within the bar. She sipped her drink, letting the warmth bolster her resolve. I have to find him. Of course you do, Lydia replied, her eyes gleaming with something that might have been pity, or perhaps recognition. But beware, Catherine. In Duskmire, the shadows aren't merely observers, they're players in this mortal drama. As the night wore on, Lydia provided leads, half-truths suffused with the bohemian mythology that wrapped around Duskmire's art scene. Whispers of clandestine exhibitions, of gatherings held in forgotten galleries where artworks wither overnight into impossible nightmares. Yet, before Lydia could fully indulge her theatrics, she leaned closer, her voice barely audible over the music and hum. "Seek him at the Place of Echoes," she murmured, her eyes locking onto Catherine's. "It's where lost souls like you might find what they yearn for." Catherine raised an intrigued eyebrow. "Lost souls?" Lydia smiled a sad, knowing smile, and for a moment the facade slipped, revealing the weary soul beneath. "We're all lost here, aren't we?" With that, Lydia retreated back into the crowd, leaving Catherine with more questions than answers. The Place of Echoes, a piece of the puzzle, or simply another shadowy legend? Either way, it was a thread she would have to follow. Chapter 3. The Place of Echoes. The streets stretched out like veins in the darkened heart of Duskmire, each one pulsing with the murmured life that never truly slept. The Place of Echoes was said to lie beneath the city's very foundations, a place whispered about in tales of artists driven to madness by their own genius. Catherine navigated through twisted alleys and hidden byways until she found herself at the threshold of an ancient archway, carved with cryptic symbols that had weathered time and weather alike. Stepping through, she entered a tunnel where the echoes of bygone whispers seemed to cling to the air. The passage sloped downwards, deeper than memory and darker than the night cloaking the city above. Each step felt like a journey into the city's forgotten marrow, where past sins lay buried amidst the roots. The chamber at the end of her descent was vast, cloaked in darkness, with only scant beams of moonlight filtering through cracks above. Shapes and sculptures stood sentinel in a sprawling gallery, their forms twisted, hauntingly beautiful, yet grotesque in their defiance of reality. An otherworldly silence enveloped the room, broken only by the dripping of water into unseen pools and the shuffling footsteps echoing from unseen corners. As her eyes adjusted, Catherine became aware of figures haunting the periphery, minds clawing for inspiration or sanity. She wasn't sure which. Story. In the center of this expansive cavern was where the exhibition took place, a collection of pieces radiating an indescribable aura that demanded both reverence and dread. Painted canvases, each imbued with a life of its own, hung within that sacred space. They seemed to whisper, to sigh, their caressing lullabies drawing nervously curious onlookers nearer in a trance-like state. Searching the eyes of those around her, Catherine saw them transfixed, lost within the endless layers of color and shadow. But she remained resistant, her senses on edge. If the night painter lurked here, masked by anonymity and the swirling haze of artistic mania, she would find him. As she prowled the edges of this subterranean exhibition, a particular canvas caught her eye. It was larger than the others, filled with chaotic strokes that spun wildly, yet came together to form the visage of a ghostly figure emerging from a swirl of shadow. It was unsettling, captivating. The painting seemed to lean into her, whispering secrets only for her to hear, tugging at threads she had long buried within herself. Almost reluctantly, Catherine's eyes were drawn to the signature at the bottom corner, a curlicute initial, a mere suggestion of a name lost beneath its own elaborate brushwork. It was a taunt, a nod, painted with flourish and finality. She reached out, fingertips brushing the air before the canvas, and she could almost feel the weight of lingering torment. Then came a voice, one that sent a cascade of chills down her spine. "Enrapturing, isn't it?" said a figure to her left, a slim man with glasses perched precariously on the bridge of his nose. He studied her with eyes intense and all-seeing, as if he had gleaned everything about her the moment she'd crossed the threshold into this realm. Catherine stiffened, masking the flash of recognition that pricked at her thoughts. "In more ways than one," she muttered, holding the man's gaze, watching for a flicker, a sign, anything that might confirm her suspicions. He smiled, a slow, deliberate curling of lips that suggested secrets wrapped in riddles. "Art speaks our truths, shows our souls. But us, we keep listening, hoping to hear a narrative that redeems or destroys." Catherine knew that smile. It belonged to someone she had encountered before she had taken on her current broken guise. In his presence, memories stirred of past investigations, of conversations cloaked in darkness. "Recognize the artist?" The man nodded, almost reverently. "The night painter has a way of weaving flesh into his color, madness into strokes. An artist unparalleled, yet cursed himself." The conversation unfolded cautiously, a verbal game of chess. Catherine probed, feinted, set traps with deft precision, seeking any insight, any hint that might unravel the tangled vines of mystery choking Duskmire. Meanwhile, those vivid paintings loomed, wielding a stranglehold on the proceedings, their distorted reflections waiting to eclipse reality. The semblance of rapport bridged around them, informed by past acquaintance rather than trust. Finally, through cryptic riddles and tense recountings, she gained a hint, a direction in which to turn as the paintings seemed to exude secrets. Story. As she moved away, seeking answers deeper within the echoes, the man's voice floated softly to her. "Beware, Catherine. The shadows know your name." Chapter 4. Descent into the past. Catherine found herself wandering through Duskmire's ancient cobblestones and time-worn facades, each aspect of her surroundings weaving into the tapestry of steadily growing unease. Persisting like a phantom thought, one that anchored her resolve, urging her to forge deeper into the city's underbelly, was Lydia's words, mirroring her deepest fears. Could the night painter indeed reflect her own darkness, the shadows she tried so hard to ignore? The transaction at the Place of Echoes haunted her, a whisper of revelation yet to coalesce. Her mind, a tempest of unanswered questions, drifted back to her own fractured history, dredging up glimpses of the life she had once known. Traumas she could not escape, decisions she could not alter, consequences she wished to rewrite. She had been a different person then, filled with hope and with ambition less twisted by what she had witnessed. The passage of time had mercilessly pressed her dreams into brittle shards, jagged reminders of what once could have been. It had led her down the path of pursuing humanity's darkness, a pursuit that had given her more than she ever bargained for. But all was not irretrievably lost. She still fought the good fight, still wrestled to cling to the light flickering at the end of her moral compass. This case, more than most, seemed to promise her a reckoning, a chance to wrest some semblance of redemption from a world mired in shadows and sorrows. On the streets, faces passed in a blur, expressionless mirages under street lamps that flickered ominously. Her instincts led her to a part of Duskmire long forgotten, a neighborhood once alive with enterprise, now derelict, draped in neglect. At its heart was a desolate building that radiated tales of yesteryears, its facade cracked and crumbling, bearing the weight of time's relentless march. This was the warehouse where whispers said, the night painter retreated to cover his canvas in silence, where muse and madness became inextricably intertwined. Catherine approached cautiously, the weight of anticipation curling her fingers around the handle of her flashlight. Heart pounding in time with the rhythmic drizzle of rain, she pushed open the door with a creak that seemed to reverberate through the very bones of the building. Story inside, shadows stretched long and impatient, beckoning her through deserted corridors layered with dust and neglect. Abandoned rooms flanked her journey, each forgotten space a tomb echoing the artistic fervor it once housed. The air thrummed with the promise of forgotten dreams turned to dust, and as Catherine pressed forward, she understood she was not just searching for a man, but was on a pilgrimage into Duskmire's haunted soul, and her own. The depths of the warehouse opened into a gallery space, cluttered with the detritus of forgotten aspirations, broken sculptures, discarded frames, and canvases that seemed to bear scars of battles both won and lost. Pinned in the center of this chaos was an easel, tall and defiant under the single shaft of moonlight breaching the dismal gloom. Upon the canvas was a work in progress, a chaotic swirl of color and intensity that seemed alive with potential. It throbbed at the edges of perception, a siren's call piercing the tangible world. Catherine felt an overwhelming drive to unravel its secrets, though she knew the revelation might consume her as it had others. As she moved closer, the tapestry of paint and texture seemed to reach out, threads connecting through time and space to moments of clarity. Her past with its jagged scars and hollowed victories, and the suffocating weight of her present. A voice rose from behind her, dark and velvety, curling with familiarity and an edge of madness. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Catherine turned, pulse quickening at the sight of the man silhouetted in the waning light. He was tall and slender, an enigmatic presence she instinctively recognized. The painter's eyes locked with hers, and for a moment the world halted, holding its breath. The Night Painter. Though a name, a title, Catherine's words were an invocation, rippling through the echoes of the warehouse. The artist stepped forward, his features carved from shadow and light, revealing a face both known and unacknowledged. He was someone she'd seen before, more than just a man amidst the crowd, more than a faceless presence in a sea of suspects. He was a reflection of what she had chosen to ignore. "I must admit, detective," he mused, his smile sad and knowing, "you have been a most captivating muse." "Cedric," she whispered, the name heavy with layers of betrayal and unrevealed truth. Cedric Banks, once a reputable artist, now an enigma, taken by the madness of his own creation. Catherine's mind whirled with memories of youthful ambition shared, dreams once in alignment, now torn asunder by fate and choice. "Why?" Catherine's query echoed through the vast expanse, a plea for understanding amidst the chaos of a mind unraveling. "I paint what is," Cedric replied, gesturing to the canvas with an artist's pride, "a reflection of our souls, our darkest recesses, the truth beneath the surface. For beauty to exist, there must be despair. You of all people should know this, Catherine." Story Cedric's eyes glinted with something unutterable, sadness, triumph, or perhaps empathy. His creations, imbued with dangerous allure, pulled at her inner struggles, painting her solitude, her failures, her life. He had captured everything she had ever fought to deny. "It was never about them," Catherine retorted, trying to steady the tempest raging within. "Those lives, those lost lives, you poisoned them, Cedric. You destroyed what you claimed to love." "But love," he murmured, stepping closer, his gaze holding hers captive, "love is not always kind." The world dimmed around her locked gaze as she faced the man she'd once admired, perhaps even loved, and the fractured visage of her own soul reflected back. The case, the paintings, the shadows of Duskmire, they all built toward this undeniable confrontation, where absolution proved as deceptive as hope. Catherine stood alone, confronting the shattered mirror of her past as Cedric's final masterpiece consumed them both with its relentless, illuminating truth. Chapter 5. Embrace of Shadows. As the luminescent madness of the painting reflected its multicolored chaos in Catherine's eyes, she knew one truth. Answers bought in shadow could never bring her peace. Yet here, amongst echoes of memory and the haunting image of a man she could never truly save, she felt the synapse of connection, of something deeper, always, entwined between light and darkness. The Night Painter, once a vibrant soul, had become synonymous with his art, fused with it inexorably, till his own identity blurred into chiaroscuro of fear and obsession. Duskmire had lent him its shadows and taken his soul as payment. Inextricably linked in a web they both spun, Catherine could see how the lines between Cedric's art and reality had dissolved over time, creating a dangerous dance that now encircled them both. "I never intended harm," Cedric said, his voice a raw edge against the lingering silence. His eyes were wide, expressive, filled with a mix of desperation and self-awareness. In each brushstroke, I searched for understanding, to capture that fleeting essence of our deeper selves. But you, Catherine, you eluded me, always just out of reach. Catherine felt the weight of those words, the spectral reflection of guilt and shared history. Conversations spilled through her memory, shared laughter, and moments of brilliance now tinged with the knowledge of what spiraled from ambition and unresolved feelings. "We were different once," she replied, the words filled with a subdued sadness. "Passionate, hopeful. How did this become who you are?" Cedric's gaze fell to the floor, and the flicker of laughter, as bitter as it was soft, escaped his lips. "We all lose parts of ourselves in the pursuit of what we deem is right. The art that should have freed me became my cage when the city closed its doors to the light." The interplay of light and dark played across his features, a battle of shadows and illumination. Here, beneath layers of madness and unwritten symphonies, remained the artist she had once admired, perhaps even loved, with all of his complexity, tragedy, and genius. "What happens now?" she asked, the question as rhetorical as it was desperate. The warehouse around them breathed with possibility, of endings, of beginnings, thick with the anticipation of fate's twisted brushstrokes. "You, my muse," Cedric began, his voice saturated with a fragile tenderness, "you must decide. This is your canvas as much as it is mine." Silence enveloped the space as they stood within it, surrounded by memories and shadows that whispered of past mistakes, painted with regret, and the pursuit that had led to this solitary confrontation. The echo of unchosen paths lingered in Catherine's mind, juxtaposed against her duty to forge justice from the murk of deception. In that moment, she saw clearly through the haze, an understanding that the reflection staring back at her was shaped not by Cedric or even Duskmire itself. It was the choices she made and those she still had to make. "I choose to step from the shadows," Catherine said, her voice firm, controlled, resilient. Cedric nodded, the acceptance etched on his features, knowing he remained tethered to his canvas of haunting specters, a prisoner of his creations. Catherine's resolve radiated, her light pushing against the darkness that seemed intent on claiming them both. Without another word, Catherine turned away from the canvases, Cedric's tortured brilliance, and moved toward the exit. Each step was a liberation, a relinquishment of the ghosts that had tied her to this place. Deep down, she hoped Cedric would find his peace, not through destruction, but by rediscovering the fragments of beauty lying dormant in the shadows. As early dawn's light began to penetrate the city of Duskmire, painting the streets in shades of awakening, Catherine emerged into it with a newfound clarity. She had faced the shadow of her past and chosen release over retention, shaping her path with each new breath of possibility. Chapter 6. The city at dawn. Dawn cast its first glow over Duskmire, wrapping the city in the quiet embrace of rebirth. The doubt and darkness of yesterday's shroud had unveiled itself to light, yet shadows still ran alongside, companions rather than oppressors, as Catherine stepped onto the cobblestones worn by history's ceaseless march. Duskmire still whispered its secrets, but today those secrets felt less threatening and more like stories yet unbidden. What unfolded from here, be it art, justice, reconciliation, or redemption, was an unfinished masterpiece, reliant on its flawed creators, those who continued to walk beneath sporadic sun and intrusive shade. Story within the growing warmth, breakwaters of color emerged through fading echoes of rain, igniting playful mirages across stained glass windows set within dusky buildings. Catherine paused, senses enmeshed with the surreal juxtaposition of hope amidst ruin, a shimmer of possibility. Life stirred awake all around her as new faces emerged from the city's belly, each one a splash on the canvas of day. The night painter's specter lingered, drifting into remembrance as storytellers thrived within the city's collective pulse. This canvas waiting to be painted as the murmur of Duskmire rose, a concerto of ambition and survival amid tales no longer concealed. Every step unknitted the sewn shadows clinging to her seams, granting her newfound freedom to breathe deeply of the city's rhythms. As she walked, Catherine understood that the shadows would always exist, both within Duskmire and within herself, but they no longer held dominion over her light. Strength rooted itself in her choices, and the knowledge that imperfection forged resilience. Around her, the city began to pulse with life, an orchestra tuning to the discordant unity of its inhabitants. Artists emerged, blinking into the dawn. Children scampered through alleyways. Merchants commenced arranging wares beneath awnings, alive with kaleidoscopic projections from the morning sun. The air filled with the scent of sizzling street fare and earnest introductions as warmth continued to wrap Duskmire in promise. Her path led toward the precinct, a destination known well yet transformed under a new paradigm of acceptance rather than avoidance. Each stride was surety itself, infusing purpose into the pulse that thrummed beneath her skin. Catherine's gait quickened, finding satisfaction in her alignment with destiny's clean slate. At the threshold of the precinct, Catherine paused momentarily, gazing upward at the august silhouette etched sharply against cerulean sky. The masks she once clung to, the encloistered guilt and battered pride, now lay crumbled in her wake, marking the beginning of her renewed truth-seeker's journey. Inside, respectful nods and sidelong glances greeted her arrival, a quiet understanding passing unspoken between colleagues well acquainted with the cost of inquiry, each woven with similar threads of compromise and belief. With a breath, Catherine moved deeper, passing through corridors where justice and moral ambiguity entwined in relentless waltz, toward the office that had become her chapel, sanctuary, and abattoir. Settled within her familiar chair, she breathed once more of the shadows a lingering touch, infused with an appreciation born of reflection. A soft smile tugged at her lips as she embraced the uncertain future, with its trials still to come. The file on her desk tabbed resolutely atop the stack of papers, signifying tasks uncompleted, one last tether to sever before proceeding into new realms of inquiry. With steady fingernails a bitten raw but now healing, Catherine flipped open the case's folder, her final gaze slipping from the pages onto framed photographs that appeared beyond life's discrete borders. Story beyond mere face and feature, the grayscale portraits manifested a striking juxtaposition between desperation and transcendence, which only equilibrium could bridge. Cedrica, both a victim of and artisan within Duskmire's tapestry, Duskmire's intricate dance of light and shadow, found herself stepping into a new story, her own masterpiece in the making.